Hello and welcome back to an episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today, I'm very pleased. Joining me, Dominik Wittenbeck. He is the group CTO at SMP Group. Dominic, he is a veteran in technology. He've done a lot of projects around digital transformation, but mainly, we're gonna talk today about ERP. And as you know, I'm telling the audience, there's a lot of vendors in this space, but Dominic is specialized in SAP mainly. So this way we're gonna talk about SAP. Some people they call it SAP. So just for people to know, without further ado, I don't like to waste much time from my guest Dominic. So tell us more about you, your background, your journey, and what you're currently up to, and then we can start the conversation from there. So the floor is yours.
Perfectly. Thank you, Mehmet, for having me in the show. Yeah. So, what do I do? Who I am? Well, I am, as you said, in the SAP space, specifically in data migration, to be specific. So, the company that I'm working for, SMP, we have like almost 30 years of experience in SAP-centric data migrations. And what does this leave me with, or what does this mean for what I do? Basically, I'm basically in the field of, well, selective data migration to be specific. And data migration, the SAP space, comes well with a couple of different twists and turns and focus areas, basically. So right now, many of you probably know that SAP has put out S4 for, well, almost a decade now, even beyond. And many of the customers are on the journey to migrating to S4HANA. But that's not like the only thing that SAP-centric data migrations typically are about. I mean, any type of modernization of system landscape that you might come across is falling into this area, as well as, of course, mergers and acquisitions, restructurings, and all these sorts of things basically fall under this category. So what what am I doing specifically in this area? So I am inside of R&D in our organization, and while you might think that data migration is probably something which is very project specific and therefore would probably be classically a services business, we as S&P have been focusing on providing a platform for facilitating these types of data migrations, basically. So my goal for the last, I'd say, how long am I business in this particular case, 15, 20 years or so, is probably like making sure that the experts that are out there in the field, that are either with my company or with affiliated companies such as like the biggest eyes or so, they have the best tools basically available, the best sources of information available, the best methodology available, if possible, all packed into software to make their lives easier. Because at the end of the day, people in data migration, consultants, data migration, they are, I wouldn't say rare, but there are not so many of them, right? And the pressure nowadays in markets really increased, not just for the modernization piece, but if you think about like, hey, you need to move out of a specific region very quickly because there's conflict happening in this region and you need to do a carve out or restructuring. This puts immense pressure on organizations to be quick on their feet to execute these types of data transformation and make them sure or make them realize basically in their system. And yeah, so I'm basically with me and my guys trying to build tools and methodology to help the people in the field executing these types of projects to be, well, as quickly and as reliable as possible.
Great. And thank you again, Dominic, for being here with me today. I'm gonna start, from where you kind of ended. And this is a curiosity kind of question. Why you mentioned that experts are rare? Why? Like, is it not that attractive? Is it because something hard to learn? Like, what's the reason for the scarcity, I would say, in the field in in this domain?
I don't know about the attractiveness of the situation. Probably, I mean, you don't know what you're getting yourself into when you start entering the job. But to be honest, with like the seniority degree of people that I see, many people that I'm working with are 15 years in the business, 20 years in the business. I don't think it's like people are leaving it, but it's very hard to get knowledgeable in this particular field because it's a super lot of factors being involved in data migration. It's not only the technical part around this, and that alone probably is good for like 2 or 3 roles to fill, but it's also the organizational part. Change management is a big topic that's always involved. So people who are really senior in the field and know what they're doing and what the nuances are that they need to like listen to and react to, they are rather, well, they're just not enough for the amount of work that's basically there. As I already said, like the change rate that's happening, right, due to external factors, economy and regional conflicts and so on and so forth, it just increases. So that puts even more pressure on the few people that are in this particular industry and business.
Great. Now, let's talk about, I would say, the real problem here, right? Or like what organizations um, face, right? So, I was working in IT department long time ago in previous lives, as they say, and the word migration used to scare us, right? Whatever migration it is, like sometimes even you do migration from on the infrastructure level from one platform to another. I've seen like teammates who were doing migration on the database level, so from one platform to another platform. So data migration usually it's a complex project by itself, right? Um, so and today we have also the theme of AI also as well, right? So
Yeah.
what makes data migration different from many other like other AI use cases, I would say?
So let me try to answer your first part of the question
Sure.
first. So why is data migration special? Well, typically data migration is a result of change that's happening in the organization. And typically, I don't know about you, but for most people, including myself, change at the very first moment is scary because it's different from what you already know. So, per se, data migration as being in the midst of this and being basically a result out of, hey, we need to migrate, you said, to a new platform, we need to introduce a new tool, or we are reviving our processes or streamlining our processes. For many people, that means that their jobs are going to change. And at the beginning, they don't even know whether that's a good change or a bad change. Many people are embracing change, specifically the ones which are overloaded per se, right? They hope for better when streamlining and well, getting stuff rid of stuff. Basically, not all are, but at the core of it, data migration always is something that is following an organizational change, making that really the hard reality of it. Because before the actual data migration, meaning before you actually did adaptations in the systems that you work in and on day in and day out, this thing might be theoretical. You might still be thinking like, yeah, well, this may pass by me, right? I might get by without even worrying. But in the end, data migration is what makes this real on the systems. You're moving your customers from A to B. You are changing the processes to align to the new, not the chart of accounts that you're supposed to have to align to a corporate structure or something like that. That, of course, is something that will then really affect your job. If not for data migration, many things will not be as like present, which is also why, well, people sometimes overlook it a little bit as being something which is at the end of the spectrum. But really, what data migrations typically surface is like many of the misconceptions that you made before, many of the, corpses that you buried in your virtual IT backyard. Basically, all sorts of data ambiguities and bad data quality comes up all over a sudden, and you have to treat it now that you're moving up to the other system. You can't avoid it anymore. And that makes migration actually more than anything else team sports, which is going across the whole organization typically. So it's not only the technical team that has to work with IT of the customer to actually make the data move and adjust it to the needs of the respective program, but it is also alignment with the business much more than anything else, because in the end, the business are the ones who have to execute their daily work on the future system. So what is one of the common problems is misalignment, specifically between the IT part of the equation and the business part of the equation. So what I see many times, and this is where AI actually comes in for like a first use case in data migration, is how this typically starts is you get an RFP as a vendor, right? Which is basically saying, hey, this is what we want to do, this is what we want to change. It typically hasn't too much of detail basically in it, but it's supposed for you to give some sort of ROM basically in the end, right? Some type of effort that goes towards this specific project that is about to happen, basically. And what you then normally do, if you can, you speak back to the customer, clarify ambiguities, you clarify things that are not explicitly written down in the RFP. And that typically happens at the beginning in the pre-sales phase, right? When you're trying to sell the
Right.
project, whatever type of business you have, whether you're a complete service business or software or a mixture of anything. What I saw happening most basically is that you clarified all these things with the customer up front. And then the project team comes in, basically. They are not too much attached to pre-sales. I mean, in a good organization, they are somewhat attached to pre-sales, but maybe they're not, right? And then they start asking the customer the same questions over and over again. The customer was like, hey, didn't I just tell you that, right? So it's really like a lack of process, really, where I think AI can first and foremost help. Because what I like to do when going into such workshops typically is I like to go ahead and say, like, okay, this is like the overall picture of things. These are the questions that I would typically ask in the situation. Is there something that I'm missing? So that's the first checkpoint. And here, to be honest, I mean, typically you would like roll this around and challenge with colleagues, right? That have seen a similar experience. But what if you're just starting out? What if you don't know anybody in the organization so far? You still have the task for getting all this information out of the customer. So then you might as well use AI to make sure that you have some level of completion in regards to the questionnaire that you're actually filing. Next, I mean, you run this questionnaire and the customer will most likely give you much more insights than your questions. Unless all your questions are yes, no type of closed questions, they will give you much more context basically than you initially asked for. When you have to comprehend this context, you have to write it somewhere down. So next case of AI, using the transcript and bringing it basically into something which is really a specification of the project that is supposed to be happening here. So really, at that point, AI is really helping you to prep for the workshops, but it's only helping you to consolidate basically in the end and create something which I'd say a specification is a communication artifact with the rest of the organization. Because once you align on it, you can always say, like, hey, this is what we stated. This is how we said it's going to go down. It's not that it's unchangeable, right? But it's basically a manifestation of an agreement that you have amongst all the parties, which is why being complete here and being precise here is something which has been super important. But AI really helps you to like even find the little gaps that you had before and close them also.
If you allow me, Dominic, I would say my 2 cents as someone who worked in pre-sales again in previous lives. I think whatever the project is, the moment you start to have the confidence that you're gonna be part of this project, I think I'm talking about pre-sales and sales teams, you should directly align with your, implementation team, because I saw it many times. And unfortunately, yeah, like what happens is like these guys, they say, okay, we're gonna just need from sales perspective, and I can understand this, just close the deal. And by the time it closes, like it's not my job anymore. Let the implementation team happen. So the way, and I think AI, as you mentioned, can help a lot here. Like at least, but back in the days when there was no AI and note taking and all this, so I tried as much as I can to put all the information as on behalf of that team. So the ultimate scenario would be like you have someone from the implementation team during the pre-sales phase also as well, right? So these guys, they are up to speed. You don't need to go and repeat the things. Now, thanks to the technology advancement and now note taking, I think it can remove some of the burden there. So mainly to get the things, but yeah, like the best thing that can happen is when you have this complete alignment between the implementation team and the pre-sales team. And I'm saying this from a practitioner perspective, someone who've been on that table. Now, if we want to jump on the migration itself, so you focus a lot on selective data transition, SDT. What
Yeah.
is it and why do companies choose it?
Well, selective data transition, and sometimes you might have heard the term Bluefield.
Mhm.
What you traditionally intuitively do when you are introducing a new system and a new or change or something like that, there is a reflex in organizations to do something that we typically call greenfield. We start anew, we get rid of all the old stuff, basically. But once you really start it, you recognize that, oh, I have to like now understand the context of what I already did in the past systems, because maybe you have legal obligations to keep specific data around for a certain point in time. You probably have invested a lot in the past system, unless, I mean, you're a startup and you're completely starting anew. I mean, then you're pure greenfield. But if you are an established company, you probably have a system of record, your ERP system, or other system there is, and you have invested a lot into this system. You have probably been tuning it. You have probably been implementing your specific processes in that actually also like will separate you from your competition in the market. So you want to retain this type of intellectual property that you put into the system. And if you put these things basically together to retain what you already have, to, well, we always say, keep the best, transform the rest, to embark to the new system, to embark to the new processes, but keep what makes you special as a company, what makes you unique, and what has built your success basically in the past, then you're mostly up for a game where you need to keep some existing configuration. You need to migrate historical data selectively for most part, because you want to get rid of some things. I mean, you want to clean up stuff at this point. And this is where you actually do a selective data transition, where you move data that is relevant for you and your business into the new system, and you transform it along the way so it complies to the new processes and the new world setup of the new environment, basically. So, as I already briefly mentioned, I mean, this is true for modernization cases, very, very, very obviously, right? You go from ECC to S4. S4 is a different thing. In the meantime, it is. But you want to keep basically your investments. But also, if you have a company and you do an M&A, for instance, you also want to completely destroy their IT infrastructure. You want to take what's best, right? But put some governance on top of that is corporate at this point. And selective data transition is exactly where you can find this middle ground, where you need between going almost the complete way green and only taking very little selective history, to almost going completely brown or conversion, and basically take almost everything that you had and change only little bits and pieces. So what SDT or Bluefield really gives you is the flexibility to stretch between these two parts seamlessly, to, I always say, like, what your organization is able to digest, because change is something that's happening, and not all the companies are super good in adopting change, depending on how centralized your structure is, how liberate your structure is, or regionally organized your structure is. That really it makes it really like different for how change ready your organization is overall. And SDT gives you basically a lever which you can put from one side to the other to perfectly match your organizational needs with what you actually can do as an organization.
Dominic, what can go wrong, if data migration is underestimated? And walk me through also maybe some of the risks as well that you have seen from your experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, data migration is mostly underrated, to be honest. Most of the people initially at least go in with, hey, that's an afterthought, where once you realize that actually this is moving your core IP, this is adapting to new processes, that is where things are basically changing. But what can happen if this goes wrong and if it's underestimated? I mean, very easily, timeline stretches, right? If you are underestimating the data migration pieces, and then during data migration, all these ambiguities and the data quality lacks that are basically happening there, they are surfacing. And then these data migration guys, they start asking nasty questions. Hey, we found this particular thing in here. So I don't know. Let's take an example which I'm currently running through with a data migration that I'm running at this point. It's like, we are migrating business partners, and I see like, hey, I have to migrate tax numbers. Now, the tax numbers in the old system, they didn't have any check algorithms basically to it. So it's like completely all over the place. The new system is enforcing these check algorithms. And I basically now in the data migration go to the business, say like, okay, hold on, we have a problem. I'm not able to get the records into the target system because they are not complying to the data integrity rules that are basically there. You have option A, B, or C how to deal with this. Now, data migration has a tendency of surfacing these types of insufficiencies that are buried in the old system and making them obvious. And if you underestimate this type of thing, and this typically means that the timeline stretches, you're effectively likely then to move the go live because of all the decisions that you didn't know you need to take and need to like align with all the other guys inside of your corporation until the decisions are finally made. And if you don't do, and one of the things that might be a shortcut is specifically if you're going towards a database only migration, well, just let's take data over as is and just let's eliminate all these validation rules. They will pop up later in your processes, right? But only across time. So another result which typically can happen then is there is bad data quality, which you should take the chance of cleaning this up for once. Experience shows that from this point on, it's going to go downhill anyhow, because all the governance that you try to take in place with, hey, let's have a fresh start. Let's like this time really, really do it right. Typically, it starts to crumble once like operational daily business basically hits in. So at least take the time at this point and clean up what you actually can.
Great advice. Now, we can't skip AI. We're gonna talk about AI, but before going deep about the AI use cases, like what would separate, or let's say, what's realistic, today, and what's aspirational?
Well, I mean, I'm working in this field for so long, and to be honest, for me, AI was always something which is helping me along the way when I get up at night at like, I don't know, 5 a.m. or something like that. Nobody's there in my time zone, at least, that I can bother asking a question, and I go basically back and front. So, I mean, optimally, there would be an end-to-end AI orchestration across the whole project lifetime, basically from the beginning. So you're selling the right thing according to the RFP. You're taking all the notes, basically, all the way through the construction of the actual data migration rule set, through the execution, the root cause analysis, and all these types of things would be end to end, basically orchestrated and basically supercharged with AI. Now, that's probably a little bit too far fetched because the field is vast. And of course, when implementing such a system, and we are, of course, as SMP right now in the midst of developing such a system, the end-to-end AI orchestration is still something which is aspirational somewhere in the future. But for individual pieces, and maybe we touched already a little bit about that, right, with the note keeping at the beginning and making sure that you got the right questions when you go into the surveys and into the customer workshops and so on and so forth. So this is where AI can already help, and many, many places more. Right now, I'd say it is yet still a little bit spotty, but the big aspiration is to make it all integrated, work as one system, basically something that is helping you to govern this thing, where governance of people and processes might be even lacking from time to time.
Dominic, where really it's helping, let's say, the pre-sales team? Is it like, responding to the RFPs or RFQs, or like, is it, you just feed it with some knowledge base from, maybe previous projects that you've worked on? And there are some people who are like skeptical still about the use of AI, especially with hallucinations and other issues that we see in AI. You know, I tried a couple of things, although like I don't have to do it in my day-to-day work, I would say. But I tried a couple of you know tools and kind of mini projects that I assigned to myself. I said, okay, imagine I had access to AI when I was pre-sales, and really the results aren't bad. Like but still you need the human in the loop, which all my guests are focusing on it. So, like, tell me what's working well today when it comes to utilizing AI in
Okay.
pre-sales.
Before I start into that, I mean, you're
Sure.
under 50% probably right, Mehmet, that as a human, you stay accountable. So AI is a tool for speeding you up or for making your work easier or even doable. in some regards, but you are ultimately responsible and accountable for the results that it basically produces, which is also why you can misuse AI if you use it blindly. I mean, you have no way of validating what is a good result. Then you probably out there in the open because you cannot follow up on anything that's basically happening. Once you know what a good result should be looking like, then AI can really like support you here. So, regards to your specific question, like pre-sales teams, I mean, you already mentioned that very rightfully. You basically, although a project is a lot size of one, because I mean, it's a project, it has very many individualities to it, there is patterns that can be recognized, right? And you typically, like you said, you feed it basically with a knowledge base, put a rack on top of it, basically, so you can retrieve basically everything in it. But one thing that we particularly do as SNP is what we do at the beginning of each of the projects, we are scanning the source environment, the source landscape. We try and basically get an X-ray of the source system because, I mean, the ground truth, what all AI needs to be grounded into in order to like stop the hallucination to the largest portion of it, is that it is fed with facts. And of course, facts reside in knowledge bases, although sometimes maybe it's arguable that it's really facts, well, more it's like, well, knowledge that's been gathered and what really works well. But we also mix in analysis of the source systems into this. That really gives us an X-ray of the source of the systems that are basically at hand to be transformed. So that's a process that we also feed into the whole procedure. We would do so, actually, and we did even do so before the age of AI. So all the surveys that we do and all the workshops that we run are fed with this analytic information that will tell you these are the business objects that have been used. You have so and so many invoices in history, for instance, in this particular entity, in this particular company codes. You're using this and that type of process in this other entity that you are leaving behind. Are you sure you want to do that? So that's type of grounding that is very organizational specific, very system specific. Most of the time, I mean, it's not only needed for AI, but it's also losing my thought here a little bit, but it's really helping you to ground the whole conversation onto something which is facts, and which is not like how I think the system would behave, but how the system is actually being used today. Because ultimately, that's the data that you're going to hit when you start doing the migration.
And I think this would help also in the handover, Dominic, as well. Like, I'm imagining if we have the common database, whatever you want to call it, about the project. I mean, this particular project. So, can I imagine as part as a one of the team members of the delivery team, I go to kind of an LLM and ask, hey, can you walk me through what the pre-sales team have done in regard to 1 2 3? So instead of you know wasting time on emails and probably meetings to align, would that also kind of
Abs-
seeing this.
Absolutely, absolutely, Mehmet. So, um, what this tool produced, again, also even before AI actually hit the game, really is a structured set of documents. So if you are a services company, you likely have best practices and you have documents, like for instance, a blueprint. And the blueprint would have very specific chapters in there, would tell you like, hey, what's the scope, which objects are basically in, what time frame am I carving out of the system or selectively migrating, what is the target that I need to go to, and so on and so forth. So having these artifacts basically, and most of them are really documents of some sort that are being produced as an output of this process step right here. Of course, would always have been the handover, or always have always been the handover into the delivery team. However, of course, with AI now, you feed the document into a chat, and you can ask very specific questions about that without needing to read this typically 180 200 page document that this is in the end, and really quickly get to the answers that you are in your particular role are interested in. So as a project lead, for instance, you would ask it about the particular time frames and maybe the off times that the customer does require, or what is their release cycle. So at what times can I not migrate before going into actually catering for the next artifact, which is, for instance, the project plan. So here, of course, AI really helps in, if you always have these intermediate steps in between, where you have these artifacts which really wrap up a specific state and basically represent, hey, this is the agreement that we had so far. Now all the basically follow-up things that happen after that can really use AI to question very specific portions to their specific role. And particularly, it's not only one of them. The technical migration lead would be another, would be asking about, hey, database sizes and system performance. So, and from there that derived, then, hey, what would I be advising for a target infrastructure to look like to be able to cope with this data migration, for instance?
Great. Now let's talk about the transformation itself, right? So the logic. How do you use AI in a safe way here? Like, and there are a lot of, you know, talks now, like if you give a lot of autonomy to the AI, it can behave in a certain way, whether that might affect the security aspect of it, the privacy, or even it might go and, I don't know, it might go and delete the whole data, which is not the thing that we want. So how do we make sure that we are using the AI safely?
All right, Mehmet. Yeah. So, I mean, you're completely right. I mean, data migration is one of the most critical parts, or the most critical things that you can actually do. It's mostly like open heart surgery, really, right? I mean, you want the system go out of the surgery, of this restructuring, basically, in a live and healthy state. And so you have to, of course, make sure that this is really the case. And now AI, of course, I mean, it's not a super deterministic thing. If you like go into, I don't know, ChatGPT or something like that, you type in a question, you get an answer. You type in the same question, different chat, same chat, you get a different answer. Semantically might be the same, but if you think about that, data migration needs to be audible in the end, needs to be deterministic fully, meaning that for the same inputs, you always get the same outputs. You cannot rely on AI doing the actual data migration because, I mean, that could lead to, it could be source of error. So what we do instead actually is that we use AI for authoring the transformation rules, for speeding this up, for coming from a customer specification, basically, or a customer requirement, and translate that into the data pipelines and into the transformation logic that then actually is being executed. So you could get a deterministic result. You get basically a data migration pipeline, or in our case, we call these data migration objects, actually. But they then execute completely deterministically, meaning that if you push the button and you export the data from the source, it's executing by the rules that were created, not by AI evaluating on the fly the data and moving it basically through the pipeline. So this makes sure that while we gain speed, specifically in the phase of creation of those rules, we still keep the determinism of the overall algorithm, which in the end an auditor will rely on, because if they're checking whether you did the thing to the system correctly, they will also want to look at what actually was used to change the data, to extract, import, and like transform the data along the way.
Great. Now, but we know, Dominic, that things can go wrong, right? And it's normal, even from a human aspect or a machine aspect. Now, let me ask you, where does AI help most once things start going wrong? Like, can it like fix things up?
It can help you fixing things. First of all, it can help you find things much more easy than you would regularly take. So let's say you have an error, and I always say everything that has not been tested is definitely broken, and most of the things that you did test is still going to be broken until you went through a couple of iterations. So let's assume things breaks, because they do. In data migration, that typically surfaces as part of an inconsistency of the target system, or you just don't get the data in because the interface that you're posting the data against just gives you something like, hey, you want to move the customer in, but I'm sorry, I require bank data for it. Now, what you then typically do is you do root cause analysis. You go into the system, you try to find out what's actually wrong here. And because of AI being very quick when having large contexts available, you can do this root cause analysis much quicker than you would typically be able to do this as a human being. Now, of course, it doesn't help with a specific problem if you just rely on general AI knowledge and capabilities, because they don't know anything about the systems underneath. So what we built in our platform Kiano, or building in our platform Kiano, is on top of all the engines that we basically have a layer of MCP, model context protocol servers, that actually expose the functionality that as a user you would have had now actually can also give to the agent. So if you want to explore like, hey, why is this particular thing inconsistent? It would go into the tool, do the navigation that you typically would do, or actually would rather call an API that basically supports this and give you the insights right away. Also, when maybe that information is not enough, it would correlate it with other information that's also somewhere in the system, somewhere in the log, and basically present you with probably a resolution. So probably this helps a lot. Not probably, this does help actually a lot. And I would like to, it puts basically the consultants on steroids because they can do much more in much less time. And basically, this is really improving the quality or the security or minimizing the risk of data migration overall.
We're seeing more and more MCP integration. So, is it something like I can, just for the sake of the, audience that might not, know the full potential of these MCPs, right? So and MCP servers. So, uh, like, to what extent you think they can be autonomous, and to what extent you think that they can play major role in these migrations? Like, yeah, you mentioned a couple of points here, but I would like you to expand a little bit more so people can in general understand the potential of these servers, MCP servers, and of course everyone talking about agents nowadays. So I would like you to explain that more.
Yeah, sure, sure. So generally speaking, what an MCP server is basically, it is exposing the functionality of your application, like an API, but to an agent, which typically means that you have to provide in this MCP server much more context than a typical API would have that you hardwire against when you build a system-to-system integration. But that foundation ultimately gives you the chance to expose all the functionality in a rich, already existing platform to the agent. Now, about how much autonomy would I typically give it? Now, in such a delicate thing as data migration, my general way of going about it is for any MCP action that has potentially changing impact or side effects on the target system, meaning that it could potentially change the state of the system because it's, migrating data in itself, or it's trying to like delete a lock or something like this. This would always be actions that would be user guided, basically. I would rate the confidence of this in this particular scenario low. So you would always ask for permission from the user, meaning the human is in the loop in this scenario. In other MCP servers and capabilities, specifically ones which do analytical tasks, where it's like read only to the system and they are side effect free, meaning you can repeat them over and over and over again, right? You get new system state that you can explore, but you don't have no chance of harming the system. I let them go, basically. I let them flow because I mean they don't like could put me into the loop. Yeah, can I like explore the logs? Yeah, can I correlate that with the data consistency verification and so on and so forth? I don't care about that. Yes, you should do that, but should I actually like set back the data migration state to before and retry the import? Oh yeah, I want to be on top of that. I want to be able to control this. So MCP really is of course a way of making it full autonomous by allowing everything basically. In the data migration scenario, particularly, I would advise anything that is harmful, potentially harmful to the system, not to allow directly, but basically use it and have the human basically stay on top of this.
Great. Now, as a business, how this might, and the AI in general, I'm speaking here, help me in situations where I need to do validation and testing.
Yeah, big piece actually. If you look like the overall, like what customers spend their time on, it's said, not exact numbers, but it's said that 40% of the time is actually being spent in preparing the test, actually executing the test. So obviously, there's a huge potential in AI supporting and helping there. So now the question is like, how do we actually speed up tests, right? Typically, I mean, the best test is a test which runs fully automatically and gives you full confidence that everything basically worked out in the end. But how do you get to an automatic test? Typically, there is test authoring. Test authoring starts typically with you write up a spec where it says like, I do this step, you expect this results. I do the next step, I expect this results. And in a very simple scenario, a human would actually go through this and execute this. Now, The next level after that, and that's a decade-old industry, is test automation, actually. So now the question becomes, how can I create tests in a very, very easy and, well, seamless fashion, basically? Now, AI can, of course, help for structuring, for instance, process documentation that you have within your company, and create a manual test script out of this with just this step approach. And then let's feed it again. And if you have a platform underneath that's actually capable of carrying out test automation, you can now translate these very distinct steps into something which the underlying test automation software does understand. So there are a couple of vendors out there, but this is basically like at the brink of where this industry currently is, like making sure that from a process specification, I get to something which is executable basically in the end. And now one of the things that typically happens is your tests break. And your tests break because of mainly two things. One, you set it up, or when it actually finds an error which is in there. The second thing is it's prone to change because you changed something in the system configuration, and a test which was supposed to run clearly before is now not anymore because of you changed how the process is going to work. And this is where self-healing capabilities of AI can actually overcome a strict test script, which just runs and it basically stops and blocks whenever a button has been moved to a different place or a value is something different. Then you can basically go to the AI and ask it, well, I mean, obviously I didn't find something, but can you actually try to find where it is now? Can you assess like how the data is being newly correlated or how it's newly being set up? Where did that button actually move? And that's at least for the self-healing process of that, I can also help in that particular step, resulting in the end in a, well, really disruptive way of how business can achieve much quicker validation times in a project than they would if they did manually, or they have test automation and have breaking tests all along.
Right. Now, of course, Dominic, such projects are great, I would say, opportunities to learn, especially migration projects, right? So, but I'm sure you can share with us, like, what do you see, like, some of the biggest opportunities maybe organizations still miss after they go live?
Well, let's say you're a professional service organization, you do project after project after project. In the past, you typically relied on the consultant basically having a memory of what they did and then apply and transfer this to the next time. So I think the biggest challenge still today is knowledge loss of I explored and seen a pattern and learned something in the project and not being able to transfer it into the next project because I personally am not staffed, documentation is insufficient, or maybe somebody else at the other end of the world in my corporation or in my services organization does the same thing, but doesn't know that this was already done and the solution for a particular problem was already found. So one of the key things here where it would be a massive help, to be honest, a little bit of an outlook into the future here, really, but to consolidate the results, document them in a structured way, better than the average human would do, which is actually not so hard to do because the underlying information you typically have, right? You have a rule set, a pipeline that's deterministic, right? That is executed by a machine already. So that is a foundation from which you can redraw documentation if you don't have any. Then you have logs, for instance, right? You have protocols which have been written out, which basically tell you about the system state. Also a great source of knowledge, specifically when cases go wrong. If you pair this with a defect management system, and also, I know there is, of course, data privacy concerns around that, but if you can like extract knowledge around that and also feed it back into a knowledge base that you can basically can reuse the next time around, then of course, I think you are in a very, very good state because then you are running into an incremental cycle of always learning, the AI basically becoming your governance engine and making sure that you don't miss anything and you refeed it basically back into your repositories, into your knowledge bases. And the next time around, the agent executes it, that knowledge is present and available, basically. I think this is where most companies today, the knowledge loss that basically gets lost because of people are leaving a specific process or a specific project or so and are not in the next one. This is something that AI can really help overcome because it's mostly about redocumentation, making sure you put back everything consistently into a knowledge base. And I mean, we all know that AI is really, really great at digesting a lot of unstructured information, summarizing it, and putting it to the format that you actually can read again and reuse.
Right. You mentioned, Keanu, your agent a few moments ago. Where all this gonna end, Dominic?
So, I mean, from an aspirational perspective, all of what we talked about is something that we want to put into the platform. We are currently at the point of building this.
Hmm.
So we're concentrating on what we already have. So in Kiano, that's a data transformation and data management platform that we as S&P built. And I myself spent the last 15 years of my career at least to like build this. And most of the time, my job was basically go and find the consultant eager to like offload the work off their head and help me put it into the software itself. So it has a great foundation already with best practices, transformation content, and all this sort of stuff, which is actually the foundation that you need to now put MCPs, put agents on top of to run automation. And basically, you have structure for how you want to process the project, which the software already knows. You have an existing knowledge which you only need to enrich. Much better starting point than if you basically start from a blank sheet of paper and you have to invent the processes basically all the time themselves. Refinement is always easier than starting off from scratch here at this base. So we are currently in the stage of building out the automation layer on top of the tools and on top of the knowledge bases that we have. But ultimately, all of the areas that we have been discussing in this session today, of course, would be something I like to tackle sometime in the future. I'm not saying in the end I want to have a click button solution that automatically runs and I don't need no people anymore. I just like people too much to like avoid them in the process, right? What I want to build in the end really is something that puts consultants on steroids, makes them much more effective, basically, and helps them to cope with the already very stressful work that they typically have. So when consultants typically come to me, they say, hey, I have like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 projects running in parallel, right? And I have to cope with the mental load that basically this puts on me. If I can be any help in that regard to get this down, we can also help to scale out the whole industry basically to be able to deliver more of those projects, which is very necessary because change is happening actually even faster, right? I mean, due to the conflicts, right, you have to carve out companies out of specific countries, right? You have system modernization pressure. You need to adopt new technology much faster, right? You need to reshape your business all over. You're buying a company, you're divesting a company, right? All these changes somehow have to materialize. And to be honest, at least in my perspective, the rate of change in this regard over the last 10, 15 years has been growing almost exponentially, right? And it's hard to keep up because there's just not the experts available in that mass that the change is happening. So, I mean, good that we have now a good opportunity with AI to support this particular field.
I gonna kind of ask you the final question based on this. It looks like we have, I would not say two camps, maybe I would say multiple camps, but all they maybe diverge or converge, sorry, into few. So we have the camp of people who are going fully on, the use of AI and, age, especially ages like 2026 for sure. It's the year of agents. Like there is no doubt about it. And you have the people who are going fully on saying like, jobs are gonna be redundant for a lot even of consultants. We've seen a couple of weeks ago, the big force and what's happening over there, and and then we have the other camp which they are saying actually companies they will be very slow and they will not be adopting the technology because actually they don't have the capability. And then you have another another camp, which is kind of mix of both, like saying okay, these companies will, they will go out of business actually because like another company will come, maybe they will buy their data, and they're gonna build on top of it using the AI agents. If we want to end this episode, Dominic, into an outlook for you, someone experienced in this domain, and there's, I don't think someone better than you, because your mission is to translate business needs into technology and vice versa, like convert the technology advancements into business outcomes. If you want to summarize and close with something regarding where we might be heading in this and your personal opinion, of course. I would love to hear it.
Yeah. So I think I'm in the camp of AI won't replace people and won't replace jobs. It will change jobs. It is
Hmm.
a very massive disruption, more than I can actually remember. But it is basically like the automation that happened a couple years ago, basically. And so, in this sense, I don't think AI will replace jobs, specifically not in an area which I experience, where people are constantly overloaded anyhow, right? And they don't know how to cope with the work. They will AI will just eat the people that don't use it. So somebody with AI will always be better or will become better than somebody not using AI at this place. So you basically have to find your way about how AI makes you a more productive individual or a more productive organization, basically. And if you can find this lean way, then this is like a great way to leverage. But to me, fundamentally, it's not a super different threat than automation to different jobs, basically in the past and is today. You always need to adopt as an individual or organization. And if you stay on top of this, if you embrace it really, then you can leverage whatever comes out of this and you can stay ahead of the game. If you don't, well, then you will let bad, and then you will also maybe laid off at some point, right? Because you just don't bring the effectiveness that now becomes basically like common standard, right? Or like convenience, so to speak.
Right, and this is why I'm encouraging people, like, at least try the tool. Maybe it's your own freedom not to use it. I mean, any tool. That I'm not speaking about a tool in specific or a solution in specific terms, but at least go and watch a demo. Of course, I know, like, there's a lot of noise out there. People, they sometimes exaggerate, a few things, but actually, some of the AI technology, it's in production today. It's working, like, it's doing stuff in a proper way. I can tell from my own experience also as well. There's no doubt, and to your point, like, I 100% agree with you about the point. Like, we need to educate ourselves, and yeah, and if we just watch and do nothing, yeah, we gotta become obsolete. Like,
You're gonna become obsolete, as you say, basically. For me personally, it's always like trying the stuff out because there's a
right,
lot of hype out there. There's a lot of hype out there, and only like fraction of this is really true, at least true for the moment. I personally always try stuff out to see how it really works, how it fits my workflow, how it improves my life, basically. And so this is how I basically try just to stay on top of the game. Now, this of course can become very, very overwhelming because I mean, new models drop like every
yes,
second day nowadays, right? So you don't need to be in the top 9 and top 1% of the adopters, right? For me, my middle ground always was like, okay, stay in the top 5 to top 10% of adoption. Don't follow every trend because you will be overwhelmed. You will be chasing
right,
things which are not real then in the end. But if you see that something gets a little bit of traction, and after you've been in the field for a little bit, you get a feeling of what that really is, yeah, then you can actually start adopting. You should adopt early, but you should adopt be like the very, very first. Other than you have a lot of time, right, and
yes.
a lot of interest in like doing like exploring and do stuff, then happily do that. But like the average fully employed person with a busy schedule, right? You don't need to be in the top 1%. It's okay if you're in the top 5 to top 10%.
Yeah, as we used to say back in the days, be on version n-1. It's okay. It's a stable version. Yeah, it does the job. So,
Yeah, and then
Dominic,
just nowadays versions pop out every second day, so it's still a lot of upkeep.
yeah. So I mean, like, maybe n-1 month. Let's say, like,
Yeah,
this is in the
that's
AI
fair.
world.
That's fair to say.
Yeah, in the AI world, like, this is how I personally I started.
Like 2 generations
Yeah, crazy times to be
alive.
witnessing,
Yes, true.
honestly. Right, Dominic, really, I enjoyed the conversation. I think it's one of the rich, uh, uh, I would say, context driven episodes that I have made, because we touch both on business and technology in a full-fledged way, I would say. So really appreciate the time, and I know how busy things can be for you. Final thing, where people can get in touch and learn more about you and the company.
Well, of course, I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn, right? That's the most easiest thing to do. You can probably read a lot of like press and articles as well. If you want to, you can actually join our our big community event, which is the Transformation World, happening July 8th and 9th this year. So that's an annual event. It's great. It's happening in Germany over here. So I know not everybody is able to come, but then you're able to watch episodes of the streaming of all the stuff that's happening there. You're going to see a lot of technology advancements that we put forward as a company, but even more important, our customers speak on stage about how they achieved success in projects that they did on top of our platform, which I think is even more important to understand and know, because then you can relate, okay, how does it actually translate to my business? So if you want to join that event, go ahead. It's really, really great.
Great. I gotta make sure I'll put the your LinkedIn profile URL in the show notes. I'm gonna put also the company URL also so they can learn more, and of course follow for more information about the event that Dominic would be sharing, I'm sure. And of course it will be on the company website. Now, Dominic, thank you again very, very much for, as I said, this rich episode from both perspectives. And this is how I end my episodes. This is for my audience. If you just discovered us, and I'm saying this, I know, yeah, after 4 years, people still discovering the podcast. I'm happy for that. I need you a small favor. If you liked, the content, I appreciate if you can suggest it to friends and colleagues, because we're trying to get you the latest and greatest with best guests ever, like Dominic, and we are discussing like the latest topics which are relevant to today's needs in the workplace and in life in general also as well. And subscribe also as well. This would be a big push and help. And for the people who keep coming back and they listen to the show, they check the episodes, they send me their emails, they send me their messages on LinkedIn. Thank you very much for doing so. Because of you, actually, the podcast, similar to 2025, this is where I start to see this real push. We are getting every week in the top 200 Apple Podcast charts in different countries. Yesterday, I saw like we were like in 6 countries differently. I need a little bit push from my friends in North America. Europe, you're doing fantastic. I think we need to do it in Germany, Dominic. So, so for my German friends, so maybe you can give us the push over there,
I can give him a
because
hint.
yeah, because really, I'm repeating this at the end of each episode, because what we're trying to do is to empower people with knowledge, bringing experts like Dominic, like showing you what's happening in the world, both in the business and technology and startups also as well. So I appreciate always this push. And as I say, always stay tuned for a new episode very soon. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.